The year is 1968. The air in the workshop smells of grease and sun-baked dust and time. A man named Gus is breaking down a tractor, an old Allis-Chalmers Model G, rusted orange, spiderweb cracks in the tires. The engine seized a decade ago. It's been sitting in a barn, a monument to forgotten work. Gus bought it for scrap, $50. He figures he can get $100 for the parts. The steel is good. He works with a quiet efficiency. Wrenches click and turn. Bolts groan as they let go of a 20-year grip. The seat is the last thing to come off. It's horsehair and cracked vinyl. He lifts it away from the frame, and he sees something. Tucked down behind the springs, wedged against the steel plate. It's not a tool. It's not a rag. It's a book. Bound in dark leather, stained with oil and sweat. The cover is bare, no title, no name. Gus wipes his hands on his overalls. He pries it loose. The leather is stiff. He opens it. The pages are filled with handwriting, a neat, precise script, and numbers, columns of numbers, and drawings, not sketches, schematics. Detailed diagrams of gears and levers, hydraulic systems he doesn't recognize. Notes in the margins, fuel consumption ratios, pounds per square inch, seed spacing to the millimeter. He flips through the pages. It's not a diary. It's a ledger, a record of work, an instruction manual for a machine that never existed. He sees a date, 1954. Then another, 1955. The numbers get more and more specific, more and more impossible. Bushels per acre that defy belief. Fuel efficiency that would be revolutionary even now, in 1968. Gus feels a strange chill. He closes the book. He knows the man he bought this tractor from, Leo, a quiet farmer who lives a few miles down the road. The man who everyone said was strange. The man who never borrowed money. The man who never asked for help. Gus picks up the phone in his office. He dials the number. Leo's wife answers. Gus asks for Leo. A moment later, Leo's voice. Quiet. Gus says, "I'm breaking down that old Alice." Leo says, "I figured." Gus takes a breath. He says, "Leo, you need to come down here. You need to see what you left behind the seat." Because this story isn't about a tractor. It's about what happens when the world tells you what you are, and you quietly, stubbornly, decide to be something else. It's a story about the devastating power of kindness and the quiet fury of being underestimated. We tell stories like this one. Stories about the people the history books forget. The quiet geniuses in barns and workshops. If you believe these stories need to be told, subscribe to this channel. Join us. Because what Leo built and what he hid changed more than just his own life. It started with laughter, 14 years earlier, March 1954. The county equipment auction. A cold wind whipped across the gravel lot. Farmers stood in tight circles, stamping their feet, hands deep in their pockets, their breath plumed in the air. Leo stood alone. He was 24 years old, back from Korea for 2 years. He had the $1,000 he'd saved, and 80 acres of his family's worst land. Rocky, hilly, the land nobody wanted. The auctioneer's voice was a rhythmic chant. A John Deere Model 50 went for a good price, a Farmall Super C for a little more. Men nodded. Deals were made. The future of a year's work decided in a moment. Then they brought it out, the Allis-Chalmers Model G, or what was left of it. It wasn't driven out, it was towed, a chain hooked to its dead frame. The engine was a block of rust. One rear tire was flat, the other was bald. The paint was peeling in long orange strips. It looked like it had been pulled from a river. A few men chuckled. Someone shouted, "What'd you use that for, an anchor?" The yard laughed. The auctioneer grinned. "All right, boys, settle down. Here we have a real fixer-upper. A project for a man with more time than sense." He looked at the tractor. "Let's be honest, it's mostly for parts. Who'll give me $50 for the scrap?" Silence. The wind blew. The only sound was the clinking of the chain. Leo raised his hand. His voice was clear. 75. The auctioneer looked surprised. He squinted. "Is that Leo Vance? Son, you sure?" Leo nodded. $75. A murmur went through the crowd. They weren't laughing now. They were watching. Someone in the back yelled, 80, just to keep it interesting. Leo didn't hesitate. 90. The auctioneer looked at the other bidder. The man just shook his head and smiled. "It's all yours, son." The auctioneer banged his gavel. Sold, for $90 to the young man who clearly likes a challenge. The crowd dispersed. The show was over. As Leo walked over to pay, a man stopped him. It was Frank Abernathy, a man everyone respected. He was in his 60s. He owned the largest farm in the county, served on the church board, coached the local baseball team. His hands were calloused, but his eyes were kind. He put a hand on Leo's shoulder. "Son, let's talk for a minute." He led Leo away from the auctioneer's stand. His voice was low, concerned. "Leo, I knew your father. He was a good man, a smart farmer. I'm not going to be the man who stands here and watches his son throw away good money." Leo was quiet. He just listened. Abernathy gestured to the tractor. "That thing is junk, pure and simple. The engine block is probably cracked. The transmission is shot. You'll spend $500 on parts, and you'll still have a piece of junk." He wasn't being cruel. He wasn't being condescending. He was being honest. He was being helpful. This is the most dangerous limitation, the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are protecting you. Certainty about another person's capabilities, delivered with kindness. It's more damaging than outright hostility, because you can't fight it with anger. You can only disprove it. And that takes decades. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, by a friend, by a parent, by someone who loved you. Someone who said, "I'm just trying to keep you from getting hurt." Tell us about it in the comments. Because what happened next started a quiet war. A war fought not with words, but with wrenches and yields. Abernathy continued. His tone was fatherly. "Look, son, you're trying to get started. That's admirable. But you need the right tools. You come to the bank with me on Monday. I'll co-sign a loan for you. We'll get you a proper tractor, a new one, with a warranty. Start yourself off right. Don't start off with a failure." He smiled. A warm, genuine smile. He thought he was offering a lifeline. He was actually building a cage. Leo looked at the man. He looked at the rusted tractor. He looked at his own hands. He said, "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Abernathy, but I'll take my chances with this one." Abernathy's smile faded. He looked disappointed, not angry, just sad, like a father watching his son make a mistake he can't stop. "All right, Leo, if you're sure, but don't say I didn't warn you." He patted Leo's shoulder again, then he walked away. Leo paid his $90. He hitched the dead tractor to his old pickup truck, and he dragged it home. The whole way he could feel the eyes of the other farmers. He could hear their thoughts. "Poor kid, doesn't have a chance." He pulled into the yard of his family's farm, the 80 acres of rock and clay. His father was waiting on the porch, an old man stooped from a lifetime of work. He watched as Leo unhitched the tractor. He walked over to it. He didn't circle it. He didn't kick the tires. He just stood there, looking. For a long time, he said nothing. Leo stood beside him, waiting. Finally, his father spoke. His voice was rough, like stones in a tumbler. "What did Abernathy say to you?" Leo told him. About the loan, about the warning, about starting off with a failure. His father spat on the ground. He looked at Leo. His eyes were fierce. "They took my arm in the war. They took the good land for the highway. They took your mother with the fever." He pointed a trembling finger at the ground. "They took everything except the dirt." He looked from the dirt to Leo. "The dirt is enough." He tapped the rusted fender of the tractor. "The rest is just steel. You can fix steel." That was all he said. He turned and walked back to the house. "The dirt is enough." That phrase became Leo's creed, his mantra, his entire philosophy. He pushed the tractor into the barn, and he began to work. For the next 6 months, the light in Leo's barn was on every night, until 2 or 3 in the morning. The neighbors saw it. They talked. "He's trying to fix that junk heap. He's possessed." Leo didn't just repair the tractor. He reimagined it. Abernathy was right about one thing. The engine was useless. The transmission was gone. So Leo didn't try to fix them. He replaced them. He found a small 4-cylinder engine from a military surplus Jeep. A Willys L134. Reliable, simple, easy to work on. It took him a month to fabricate the mounts, to line up the drive shaft. He used a cutting torch and a welder. His hands were always burned, always covered in grease. He taught himself metallurgy from library books. He learned about stress points and torque. The original Model G was a cultivating tractor. Its engine was in the rear. This gave the farmer a clear view of the ground in front. Leo kept that design, but he improved it. He needed more than just a cultivator. He needed a universal tool. The original tractor had a simple mechanical lift. It was weak. It was unreliable. Leo scrapped it. He drove 200 miles to an aircraft salvage yard. He bought hydraulic pumps and cylinders from a wrecked B-25 bomber. He spent weeks adapting them, designing his own system of hoses and valves. He created a 3-point hitch, something that wasn't standard on small tractors at the time. He could now attach a plow, a mower, a seed drill. He was building a machine that John Deere and Farmall wouldn't invent for another 10 years. He did it with scrap metal, and library books, and a singular, relentless focus. The dirt is enough. He reinforced the frame. He built a new gearbox from a combination of truck parts and custom-cut gears. He worked in silence. His father would bring him dinner, a plate of food and a glass of milk. He'd set it on the workbench and leave. No words were needed. The work was the conversation. By the fall, it was ready. He painted it himself. Not the original orange, a deep, dark green, the color of a healthy crop. The day he first started it, the sound was wrong. It didn't sound like a tractor. It was quieter, higher pitched. The Jeep engine purred. He drove it out of the barn. It moved with a strange grace. His father came out onto the porch. He watched. Leo drove it to the rockiest part of his land, the part everyone said was unfarmable. He lowered a small plow he had built. The steel cut into the hard soil. The tractor didn't strain, it pulled. The engine didn't roar, it worked. For the first time in 2 years, Leo smiled. The neighbors watched from their own fields. They saw the strange green machine. They saw it plowing land they had written off. They didn't understand what they were seeing. They saw a man on a piece of junk. They didn't see the B-25 hydraulic system. They didn't see the Willys engine. They didn't see the years of innovation that were happening in that barn. They just saw the boy who wasted $90. Frank Abernathy drove past one afternoon. He was in his new pickup truck. He slowed down. He saw Leo in the field. He saw the tractor. He shook his head, a look of pity on his face. He drove on. The witness who watches, from a distance, convinced of his own judgment, certain of his own kindness. That winter, Leo built more attachments, a precision seeder, a front-mounted cultivator that he could steer with his feet. He was designing for a single operator, for efficiency, for a man with only 80 acres of bad land and no room for error. The next spring he planted corn, soybeans. He used a different method, based on the books he was reading. He spaced his rows wider, but the seeds in the rows closer. He cultivated more often, keeping the weeds down. His little green tractor was perfect for it. It was light. It didn't compact the soil. It sipped gasoline. His neighbors, with their big, heavy machines, they were burning fuel, packing the earth. They farmed with horsepower. Leo farmed with intelligence. The summer was hot and dry. Crops around the county started to suffer. Leo's crops didn't. His methods conserved moisture in the soil. His fields stayed green while others started to turn yellow. People started talking at the co-op. Did you see Leo Vance's corn? It's a fluke, beginner's luck. That rocky soil holds water differently. They found a dozen reasons. None of them was the man or the machine he had built, because admitting that would mean admitting they were wrong. Admitting that the $90 piece of junk was better than their $5,000 new machines. Admitting that the quiet boy they pitied was a better farmer than they were. Certainty is a hard thing to let go of. The harvest came. Leo's yields were 40% higher than the county average, 40%, on the worst land, during a drought. He took his grain to the co-op. The manager weighed it. He looked at the numbers. He looked at Leo. How did you do this, son? Leo just shrugged. Good soil. He sold his crop. He took the money. He went to the bank. He didn't deposit it. He put it in a safe deposit box. Cash. He didn't trust banks with his money. He trusted steel and dirt. The dirt is enough. Let me tell you about the next few years, because this is where the story becomes bigger. This is where the quiet work starts to make a loud noise. 1956. The farm next to his went up for sale. 30 acres. Better land than his. The owner had died. His kids wanted to sell. Leo went to the auction. He stood in the back. Frank Abernathy was there. He was bidding on the land. For his son. The bidding went up. Abernathy was confident. He was the richest man in the room. The price reached $3,000. The auctioneer was about to close. Then Leo's voice, from the back. 3,100. Abernathy turned. He saw Leo. He looked surprised. Then he smiled that kind, paternal smile. He shook his head, a little gesture that said, "Son, you're in over your head." He bid 3,200. Leo bid 33. They went back and forth. The room was silent. Everyone was watching. The price hit $4,000. Abernathy was starting to look annoyed. He bid 4,100, his voice sharp. Leo's voice was calm. 4,200. Abernathy hesitated. He looked at his son. He looked at Leo. This was not about land anymore. This was about certainty. He let it go. Sold. To Leo Vance. After the auction, Abernathy approached him, not with kindness this time, with a cold curiosity. "Where are you getting the money for this, son? The bank won't give you that kind of loan." Leo looked at him. "I don't have a loan." He didn't say any more. He didn't need to. The implication hung in the air. Cash. Leo bought the 30 acres. Cash. He worked it with his little green tractor. The next year, he had 110 acres. His yields were still the highest in the county. 1958, another 40 acres came up for sale. On his other border. He bought it. Cash. 1960, the price of corn dropped. Farmers were hurting. Many had big loans on their new equipment, big mortgages on their land. Leo had no loans, no mortgage. He owned everything outright: the tractor, the land, the equipment he had built himself. He was insulated from the market. He was self-sufficient. He weathered the storm. Some of his neighbors did not. Abernathy lost money that year. He had to sell some of his cattle to cover his equipment loan. He drove past Leo's farm. The fields were perfect. The little green tractor was out there, working, always working. The witness was still watching, but the pity was gone, replaced by something he couldn't quite name. It was a mixture of resentment and grudging respect. By 1965, Leo Vance owned 300 acres. He had 2 more of the green tractors now. He had built them himself, improving the design each time. He hired 2 men to help him. He paid them well, in cash. He was no longer the strange boy. He was a force. He was a success. But he was still quiet. He never went to the diner for coffee with the other farmers. He never boasted about his yields. He just worked. He and his father still lived in the same small farmhouse. They ate dinner together every night. They rarely spoke. The work was the conversation. One day his father said, "Abernathy is selling the 80 acres that borders our north field." Leo nodded. "I know." His father said, "His son doesn't want it. Moved to the city." Leo said, "I heard." His father looked at him. "Your mother always liked that piece of land. It has a creek." That was it. The next day, Leo went to see Frank Abernathy. He didn't go to the auction. He went to the man's house. It was the first time they had spoken in years. Abernathy was older now. His shoulders stooped. He looked tired. He invited Leo in. They sat at the kitchen table. Abernathy's wife brought them coffee. There was an awkward silence. Finally, Abernathy spoke. "I suppose you're here about the North 80. Leo nodded. "I'm selling it. I need to." The words came out hard, an admission of defeat. Leo said, "I'll buy it." Abernathy looked at him. A long, searching look. He saw the quiet confidence, the calloused hands, the lines around the eyes. This was not the boy from the auction. This was a man who had been right, when he, Frank Abernathy, had been wrong. He said, "The bank appraised it at $10,000. Leo didn't flinch. "I'll give you $12,000. Abernathy was stunned. "Why? That's more than it's worth." Leo said, "My mother liked the creek." He stood up. "Let me know what you decide." He left. A week later, Abernathy called him. He accepted the offer. Leo bought the land. Cash. He now owned the land on 3 sides of Abernathy's farm. The man who was supposed to fail. The man who was supposed to be protected from his own foolishness. He was now the most successful farmer in the county, and he had done it all with a $90 tractor and a belief in the dirt. Which brings us back to 1968, to the workshop, to Gus, the mechanic, holding the leather-bound book. Leo arrived in his pickup truck. He walked into the workshop. He looked older. His hair was graying at the temples. He moved with a slow, deliberate pace. Gus handed him the book. "I found this, behind the seat." Leo took it. He looked at it for a long moment. He ran a thumb over the worn leather. He didn't seem surprised. Gus said, "Leo, what is this? The numbers in here, the drawings. I've never seen anything like it." Leo opened the book. He flipped to a page, a detailed schematic of his hydraulic system. He said, "It's just some ideas I had." Gus shook his head. "Ideas? Leo, this is more than ideas. This is revolutionary. That hydraulic lift you designed? John Deere just came out with something similar, last year. You designed this in 1955. He pointed to another page. "This fuel intake manifold, the way you modified it for the Willys engine, that's a custom Venturi system. It increases fuel atomization. It's why that little engine could pull a plow. It's why you were getting 50% more fuel efficiency than anyone else." Leo was silent. He just looked at the pages, the record of his lonely nights, his quiet war. Gus's voice was filled with awe. "Leo, you could have patented this stuff. You could have sold it. You could have been a millionaire." Leo finally looked up from the book. He looked at Gus. He said, "Who would I have sold it to? The man at the auction yard? The neighbors who laughed? The banker who wanted me to have a proper machine?" His voice was not bitter. It was factual, devastatingly factual. He said, "Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind, that's the loneliest fight there is. You don't do it for money. You don't do it for glory. You do it just to prove you have a right to your own mind." He closed the book. He said, "The tractor is yours, Gus. Scrap it. Sell the parts. Do what you want." He turned to leave. Gus said, "What about the book?" Leo stopped at the door. He looked back. "Burn it." And he left. But Gus didn't burn it. He couldn't. He felt like he was holding a piece of history, a secret history. He didn't know what to do. So he called the one person he thought might understand. He called Frank Abernathy. Abernathy was mostly retired now. He came down to the workshop. Gus showed him the book. Abernathy sat on an old wooden stool. He put on his reading glasses, and he began to read. He read about the engine mounts, the gearbox, the hydraulics. He read the columns of numbers, the yields, the profits, the cash purchases. He saw his own name mentioned once. March 1954. Met F. Abernathy at auction. A good man. Thinks he's helping. Advised against buying the tractor. Offered to co-sign a loan. Certainty can be a prison. Abernathy closed the book. His hands were shaking. He had not been a villain in Leo's story. He had been something worse. He had been the kind antagonist, the well-meaning gatekeeper, the man who, in trying to protect a young man from failure, had almost prevented his genius. He finally understood. The quietness, the distance, the cash. It wasn't arrogance. It was freedom. Freedom from having to ask for permission. Freedom from having to explain himself to men who were certain they knew better. Abernathy stood up. He said to Gus, "I need to borrow this." He took the book, and he drove to Leo's farm. This was the reckoning. Not a loud confrontation, a quiet one, on a porch, between two old men. Leo was sitting in a rocking chair. He saw Abernathy's truck pull in. He didn't get up. Abernathy walked up the steps. He was holding the leather book. He held it out to Leo. He said, "You should have let me help you." Leo looked at him. He didn't take the book. He said, "You did help me, Frank." Abernathy was confused. "How?" Leo said, "You told me I couldn't. You and everyone else. You drew a line in the dirt, and you told me not to cross it. You gave me something to push against." Abernathy sank into the other rocking chair. He looked defeated. "I was trying to be kind," he whispered. "I know," Leo said. "That's what made it so hard. Anger is a fire. It burns hot and fast. But pity is a slow poison. It makes you doubt yourself. It makes you think, maybe they're right." He looked out at his fields, stretching to the horizon. "I spent every day for 14 years proving your kindness wrong." Abernathy had tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Leo. I was a fool." Leo was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You were certain. That's worse than being a fool." He finally took the book from Abernathy's hand. "Thank you for bringing it back." The conversation was over, but the story was not, because that book did not get burned. Abernathy, to his credit, understood its importance. He convinced Leo to donate the last of the green tractors and the book to the State Agricultural College. It sits in a museum now, the $90 tractor behind a velvet rope. The leather book is in a glass case beside it, open to the page with the hydraulic schematics. Engineers come to study it. Students write papers about it. They call it the Vance Tractor, a lost piece of American ingenuity. But the legacy is more than that. Leo Vance used the money he made, not to buy a bigger house or a fancier car. He created a foundation. The Dirt is Enough Foundation. It gives out grants every year to young farmers, to inventors, to people with strange ideas that nobody else believes in. It doesn't give loans, it gives cash, no strings attached. The only requirement is that the recipients have been told no, that they have been told they can't, that they have been offered protection from their own dreams. Leo's children and grandchildren still run the farm. They use modern equipment now, but in the main barn, hanging on the wall, is a single rusted fender from the original tractor, a reminder. The rest is just steel. You can fix steel. Leo passed away in 1998. His funeral was small, just family and a few close friends. Frank Abernathy was there, an old man bent with age. He didn't speak. He just stood at the back, a quiet witness to the very end. The story of Leo Vance is not about tractors. It's about the profound and terrible gap between what other people decide for you and what you can actually do. It's a story about how the most powerful innovations often come from being excluded from the old systems. When you are denied access, you are forced to create a better solution. Right now, somewhere in the world, a young person with a brilliant idea is being told no. Not with malice, but with kindness, with concern. Someone is trying to protect them from failure. Someone is certain they know better. And that young person has a choice, to believe the kind voice of limitation, or to go home, to their own barn, their own workshop, their own mind, and start the lonely work of proving that kindness wrong. If this story means something to you, if you've ever felt the sting of being kindly underestimated, share this video with someone you know who needs to hear it. someone who is in the middle of their own quiet fight. Subscribe for more stories of the people who changed the world from the margins. And in the comments below, tell us, who was your Frank Abernathy? And how did you prove them wrong? Because the world is not changed by the people who are certain. It is changed by the people who have the courage to listen to a different voice. The quiet, stubborn voice inside them. That says, the dirt is enough.